Okay, so tonight we'll be continuing our study in Psalms, picking up with Psalm 7. So this is also a Psalm of David. Now here comes the trivia question. Does anyone here happen to know how many Psalms David wrote? Yeah. A bunch is the right answer. That's very close. The right answer, the precise answer is 73 of the 150 Psalms. So just a little less than half, okay? All right. And as I said before, as I mentioned before in my previous teaching, I have an affinity for his Psalms in particular. I really do, because he doesn't mince words. He doesn't hold back. He just pours his heart out to God in a very raw and very real way. And this perhaps is this quality perhaps that is why he's referred to as a man after God's own heart. And it kind of caused me to ask myself this time, when we go before God, are we holding anything back, or are we laying all the cards on the table? So when we're praying, walking, talking with God day to day, are we laying it all out for him and discussing it with him, talking to him about what's going on? I know these days with what's going on in my life, I've been talking to him a lot for sure. But it's really something we need to think about. And here's a little secret. You might as well lay him all on the table, because he already knows anyway. Regardless of what it is, regardless of if it embarrasses you, he already knows anyway. But he wants you to come to him about it and talk to him about it and be open and honest with him. So also, fair warning tonight, in digging into the backstory of this psalm, to give it some context, I had to really do a lot of digging, and we're going to be discussing some of what went on in Saul's life and what went on in David's life and why this psalm is being written in the first place. So I'm going to do my best to give you the context for it, but we're going to have to go into the books of Samuel 1 and 2 a little bit to get that context for you. So before we dive into Psalm 7 and in our study here, I'd like to point out a couple of points of interest about this psalm. So I discovered in my study that this is a very special psalm. It's the only one of its kind. And you might be asking yourself, what makes this psalm so special? Well, we know that psalms are songs, right? They're hymns that are sung to the Lord. But this is a very specific style and type of song. Can anybody, is it up on the screen right now, the name of it? Okay, anyone want to take a shot at trying to pronounce that one? Because it took me 100 times. You're very, very close. Nope. Here's the version, the translation from Hebrew to English that I picked that I could actually say. There was two or three of them, but this is one I picked. Shiggaion. Despite of how it's spelled, that's how it goes. So what is a Shiggaion? Anybody? I'm sure you guys are like, what in the world is this? So here's what a Shiggaion is. Shiggaion is a passionate, emotional, or wild song with irregular or fervent changes in the tone. Something like a dithyramb or a rhapsody, intense and unrestrained. Related to the Hebrew word shigah, which means to wander, to reel, or to go astray, suggesting a wandering melody or a song born out of turmoil. And that's kind of the punchline for this psalm, is turmoil. It was certainly written during a time of turmoil. Now, you have to forgive me in advance here, but the only modern song that I could think of that would give us some type of context or relevance and public service announcement, I'm not endorsing this song, okay? But yes, I have to admit, I have heard this song before. Because, hello, Gen X, if you were Gen X and you grew up in a time that I did and you have working ears, you have heard this song whether you wanted to or not. Because it was played all the time, especially in the early 90s, okay? But, so I'm confessing, yes, I've heard this song, I have to admit it. But the name of the song is Bohemian Rhapsody. So there you go, Rhapsody's in there, it was kind of part of the definition. So if you've heard it, you'll kind of understand the styling. If you haven't heard it, I'm not telling you to go listen to it. Please understand that, okay? But that particular song, it wanders all over the place. It runs through a whole gamut of emotions. The beat and the style is kind of chaotic. It's all over the place. So if you know that song, you know, and you have a reference to it. That's the style of song we're talking about. That's what a Shiggaion is. Okay, and regarding any historical context behind what is going on at the time when David wrote this, this is the only hint that we're given is this: a psalm of David, which he sang to the Lord concerning Cush of the tribe of Benjamin. So the big mystery to solve here is, who is Cush of the tribe of Benjamin? We'll dig into, I dug into here's what some scholars said, here's what some references said, and it kind of goes all over the place as well. So I narrowed it down to 3 possibilities based on what scholars and others have written about who this Cush might be. So the first one that they threw out there was Shimei. You remember him? Shimei was the one who, as David was retreating from Jerusalem on one of the outer villages, this guy shows up, starts yelling and cursing at him, throwing rocks, okay? Calling David a bloody man while he was fleeing from Absalom. And then the second one they threw out there as a possibility was King Saul himself. And this one kind of made me scratch my head. Because here's why they came to that conclusion, because his father's name was Kish, and commentators theorize that Cush is a play on words. But David traditionally showed deep respect for Saul. And if we take a look at when this was written, Saul's not really in the picture. So he's really not a good candidate for this. And then finally, there's some unknown traitor who is unnamed. And he comes from the tribe of Benjamin, and is somehow, he's either a spy or a courtier or something like that, who's gotten near David's inner circle and is causing problems. Now, in my opinion, this third one is the one that fits the best. And that's why David uses that just odd description of him and isn't very specific about it. So I lean to the last one of those 3 choices. But first, now we're going to dig into the psalm a little bit. We're going to read the first 2 verses of Psalm 7. I'm going to read it in New King James, and I'm going to read it again in New Living Translation. So listen to what David's saying here. O Lord, my God, in you I put my trust. Save me from all those who persecute me, and deliver me, lest they tear me like a lion, rending me in pieces, while there is none to deliver. In New Living Translation, it says this, the same 2 verses: I come to you for protection, O Lord my God. Save me from my persecutors, rescue me. If you don't, they will maul me like a lion, tearing me to pieces with no one to rescue me. Okay, so it sounds like somebody has really gotten to David here and gotten him really worked up. It sounds like he's dealing with a serious threat of some kind. It's causing him to be all riled up and cry out to God for his life. So here's why I think that the Cush of the tribe of Benjamin was some unnamed but courtier, spy, flatterer from Saul's tribe. Okay, if we know Shimei was a loudmouth. He was kind of like a one-time deal. Just happened once. It's the only time he's really mentioned. And certainly he wouldn't have been in a position to get anywhere near David's inner circle and stir up trouble for him among his court. And then Saul, although he was a big threat during the time of David's life when he was young, he's gone at this point. So he's not in the picture. It can't be him. But someone else from his tribe could definitely be the problem, and that would be that unknown traitor who's some real threat, who's stirring up dissension, talk of rebellion among his courtiers, perhaps even threatening David's life at this point. This is the one that makes the most sense to me. And that's just my own opinion based on the research that I dug through. And I think it fits because I don't think David really knew who this person was either, and that's, again, why he kind of gave him that obscure name. Now, I think that most of us know that there was some bad blood between the tribe of Benjamin, Saul's tribe, and the tribe of Judah, David's tribe. So I'll try to give you a kind of a brief nutshell version of how this all came about. So we know that Saul was chosen by God as Israel's first king. And although God did choose him to be king and Samuel anointed him, he didn't really want that office, did he, at the beginning? Okay, on the day of his coronation, where was he? He was hiding with the luggage that everybody brought, that had come to see him get coronated. Okay, but he did get coronated and did begin his reign. And his reign started out okay. He was leaning heavily upon Samuel, Okay, and the favor of the Lord was with him at the beginning. But as we know, later in his reign, he started to get a bit heady, didn't he? He stopped seeking God's counsel. He overstepped the boundaries of his office, which God had set in place for him as king. He says, as king, you go here, but no further. And he just thought he could do better on his own. And so his downfall began in 1 Samuel 15. Now, God spoke through Samuel to Saul and commanded him to wipe out all the Amalekites, even their animals. All means all to God. But Saul just didn't seem to get that. So they killed all the Amalekites, except he captured the king and took the best of the animals. So we're going to read a little bit here, 1 Samuel 15, verses 10 through 15, to kind of walk you through that and what went on. So now the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, I greatly regret that I have set up Saul as king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried out to the Lord all night. So when Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul, it was told Samuel, saying, Saul went to Carmel, and indeed he set up a monument to himself. And he has gone on around, passed by, and gone down to Gilgal. Then Samuel went to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed are you of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord. But Samuel said, What then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears, and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? And Saul said, They have been brought from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God, and the rest we have utterly destroyed. Okay. So let me kind of paraphrase this a little bit. So Saul was like, oh, well, see, I took the best of the animals to sacrifice to the Lord. Realistically, he was probably not even telling the truth about that. Now, here's the real question. Did God ask him to take the best of the animals and make a sacrifice to him? So Saul's rationale here seems to be this. Well, I mostly obeyed God. I almost obeyed God. That should count for something, right? But let me ask you this. Do you think that I mostly obeyed or I almost obeyed carries any weight with God? No. So this is something we should consider also about ourselves in our daily walk. When it comes to obeying the Lord, is this the attitude that we have? Do we obey? Do we obey a little bit or somewhat or almost? Or do we go all the way and obey him? Just some food for thought that came to me as I read through this. And then picking up, we're going to finish up this story in 1 Samuel 15, verses 20 through 23. And here we go. And Saul said to Samuel, But I have obeyed the voice of the Lord and gone on the mission which the Lord sent me, and brought back Agag of Amalek, and I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took of the plunder of the sheep and oxen, the best of the things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. Okay, let's pause right there for a second. Did you catch some of the things that he said? So Saul's like, I did obey the Lord, and then goes on to list two different ways in which he clearly disobeyed the Lord. Right then and right there. One was capturing the king, and two was keeping the best of the animals. And this time he kind of tried to brush it aside. Well, the people did that. The people did it, right? But also, this is the one that caught me the most. Did you catch how he refers to God as the Lord your God, not the Lord my God, your God? You can kind of see the heart condition there and his attitude towards God. And then Samuel drops the hammer in verses 22 and 23. So Samuel said, Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. Pretty tough right there. And as we all know, let me ask you this question. Did Saul's reign end right there when Samuel declared this? No, it didn't. There was a whole lot more that went on before that was to occur. But it did occur. And if you remember, there was David and Goliath, the battle with the Philistines, all that took place, and then David comes into his house. And the favor of the Lord and the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul. Okay, and he was tormented. That's why he wanted David to come. Somebody said, hey, David, come sing to him, see if you can cheer him up. But years later, eventually, yes, the monarchy did eventually pass from the tribe of Benjamin to the tribe of Judah. Now, this is a question that came to me as I was researching this. If we've read our Bible, we know from prophecy given way back in Genesis that Judah is the tribe that is supposed to hold the monarchy, right? So I'm going to read for you real quick Genesis 49, 8 through 10, which is the prophecy about Judah. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. Now, we all know who Shiloh is, right? This is a prophecy from Genesis already talking about Jesus, who's in the line of Judah and David, to whom that shall belong, Jesus the Messiah. So know that we went on a little side trip here, kind of setting the context of what went on with Saul, and we're going to talk a little bit about what went on with David, and why, but this is why there's this rub between the tribe of Benjamin and the tribe of Judah, because Benjamin had it first, and they really wanted to keep it. Okay. So during the reign of David, there was tension ongoing with this tribal resentment from wanting to, the shifting of the kingship over to the tribe of Judah. And I don't know if you know this, but after Saul's death, there was a brief civil war between David and Saul's son. His name was Ishbosheth, I think they're trying to say that correctly, supported by Abner over him. And the tribe of Benjamin was central to that opposition. And then later rebellions, which we also studied in Psalm 3 and 4, Absalom's revolt, but he was not from the tribe of Benjamin, he was from David's line. But then Sheba's uprising, you ever heard of him? It was a brief little uprising that occurred right as David was coming back to Jerusalem. He rebelled, but that didn't last very long. Okay, so now let's get back on track and dig back into the psalm. Now that we've kind of set the stage, I'm going to reread 1 and 2 because now it's been a minute since we read it. All right, so to get us back on track here, 1 and 2 says, O Lord my God, in you I put my trust. Save me from all those who persecute me and deliver me, lest they tear me like a lion, rending me in pieces, while there is none to deliver. So these verses where David is crying out, they're just very straightforward. There's no gray area here. He's just crying out, save me, O God. It's an opening cry of refuge and protection. God, I need you to step up and defend me. Otherwise, I'm done for. I have no defense without you. That's what David's saying here. Now listen to what David has to say about his defense in the later psalm, Psalm 62. Psalm 62, verse 2. Here's what he declares. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be greatly moved. And then in the next 3 verses of Psalm 7, David shifts from checking in with God regarding his own innocence in this case. All right, so Psalm 7, verses 3 through 5. O Lord my God, if I have done this, if there is iniquity in my hands, if I have repaid evil to him who is at peace with me, or I have plundered my enemy without cause, let the enemy pursue me and overtake me. Yes, let him trample my life to the earth and lay my honor in the dust. So here, David's continuing to cry out to God, stating that if he's guilty of anything that these guys have been saying, okay, that God should let him be judged. Just let him be handed over to them and be done away with. But here's my thoughts on these verses. I'm pretty sure that David knows in this case and believes that he is innocent of this wrongdoing. Yet, he goes ahead and appeals to God saying, Lord, you judge me. Now, if we look into his past, okay, and compare the things that were just listed in those verses, did David ever have iniquity on his hands? Yes, he did.
Is this post Bathsheba?
Yes. Yes, this is, and that's exactly right. So yes, taking another man's wife, a man who was one of the leaders of his army, currently on the battlefield for him, and getting her pregnant, yeah, that's iniquity right there, for sure. Now, the next one, did he ever repay evil to him who was at peace with him? To someone who was at peace with him, did he ever repay him with evil? Yeah, and his name was Uriah. Uriah the Hittite, a fiercely loyal and devoted elite soldier in King David's army. The husband of Bathsheba. And yeah, I'd say that trying to cover up his sin by recalling him home and then later sending him back out to be killed certainly qualifies as exactly that. Repaying evil to him who was at peace with him. Now then the next one that's listed in the psalm is plundered enemies without cause. Now, actually, I'll tell you this, nothing comes to mind on that one. And so I had to go digging. I went digging through David's life, and guess what I came up with? I couldn't find where he'd ever done that, where he had plundered his enemy without cause. That's the key phrase there. If he plundered anybody, he had cause to do it. Okay, and that was mostly in his younger life. But still, doesn't it seem kind of counterintuitive to us that he would be calling out to God and asking him to judge him on these issues? I'll open the floor for questions. Does it kind of seem that way? What do you think?
Possibility that when he was in the land of the Philistines, he went raiding a lot there. Might have been what he was referring to, because he killed everyone in the village so no one could escape and tell what he'd done. And he would tell his commander that he had went to the area of Judah and done it.
Yeah. Yeah, and David did some mercenary work during that time for some other folks. So here's my thinking on this. I think that he can do this. He can call out to God and ask him to judge him on these issues, because as he stands now, in this current time before God, he has been forgiven for those incidents. Okay? He is standing in complete forgiveness, innocent before God. Otherwise, it would not be very wise to be calling down God's judgment on himself. And we can know all of this by reading about David's response when Nathan confronted him about his sins involving Bathsheba and Uriah, and God's response to David through Nathan. So as I read, think about this, think about the contrast between David's response to God and Saul's response that we read earlier, okay? So in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 13, here's what occurs. So David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." And Nathan said to David, "The Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die." Period. Now before this, you know what Nathan had told him. He gave him a little parable. And what was David's response? He says, okay, so here's what this guy did. What should be done with this man? Well, he should be put to death, right? Nathan says, this man is you. And that's where David comes and says, oh, I have sinned against the Lord. So you see the difference in David's response versus Saul's response here. David is convicted. He knows he's wrong and immediately confesses when Nathan calls him out. And God forgave him then and there. Now, of course, with sin, there's always consequences, and there were consequences here. And so that child that was conceived with Bathsheba and died. That was consequences. But for me, this also brought to mind another scripture, was written much later. That it addresses sin, but if you look at it carefully, you can also see the contrast again between Saul's response and David's response. So for this, I'm going to take you to New Testament, 1 John chapter 1, verses 8 and 9. Read verse 8 in the context of Saul. If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. Now, kind of consider it through the lens of David. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. All unrighteousness. All of it. So say all. Okay. How much is all? That's right. All is all. Okay? So quick recap here. David has cried out for God's protection. He presented himself before the Lord to be judged if he is guilty in this moment, in this standing. But he is standing in God's forgiveness and standing firmly on his faith in God. So in these next verses, he's going to pivot. He's going to talk about his enemies, putting them into God's hands. And I'll do a little compare and contrast here with these next few verses, utilizing the New King James and the New Living. Okay? So we're going to go to Psalm 7, verses 6 through 8. And here it says, "Arise, O Lord, in your anger. Lift yourself up because of the rage of my enemies. Rise up for me to the judgment you have commanded. So the congregation of the peoples shall surround you for their sakes. Therefore return on high. The Lord shall judge the peoples. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness and according to my integrity within me." Now, one of the reasons that I wanted to compare between these two different translations here was because I was struggling a little bit with the second half of verse 8. So perhaps I was thinking too concretely, or because we see things a little bit differently from the side of the cross. So I was good with the first half of verse 8, which says, "The Lord shall judge the peoples." Okay, yes, amen, no problem there. But when we get to the second half, where it says, "Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness," my immediate reaction to reading this was, "Oh Lord, please don't judge me according to my righteousness, because I have none. Jesus is my only righteousness. He took my place. Please judge me according to his righteousness." That's just my gut reaction when I first read this. And then I had to take this and ponder and pray about it. And I realized that really David is speaking from the same place as well here. And I'll show you in just a moment. So you have to take what he's saying with all the context around it and the previous Psalms that were written, and not get too caught up in the words like I did and think concretely. So if you jump back to Psalm 4, verse 1, here is what he says there. And the light bulb can goes on and we get it. Okay? He says this, "Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness." You catch that? God is his righteousness. He knows this, and that is his position, the position he's speaking from the verse we just read in verse 8. And now here's that verse 8 again in New Living Translation. "The Lord judges the nations. Declare me righteous, O Lord, for I am innocent, O Most High." All right, so David is calling for God to rise up against his enemies and show up and show out. Now let me ask you this question. Here's another one for you. Do you ever find yourself saying similar things during the day, during the workday or whatever, when you are speaking your own psalms to God? Go get him, God. Knock him out. Smite, smite, right?
Do we, is that us asking, not the don't give me the consequences of my actions?
Basically, and just kind of saying, here, handle my enemies because they're bugging me right now, right? Because we have a tendency to do that, okay? But here's some food for thought on this. Whenever we say or do or speak something along these lines, okay, calling for God's justice, which we ourselves should fear very much without Christ, right? We need to come from the right place when we speak it, ensuring that we, like David here, have our business squared away with God, that our heart is in the right place, and that we are in right standing with him. Not coming from a place of our own anger, judgment, or wrath. We need to hand that over to God to deal with. So also something else to consider in David's case in this psalm here. So consider this, okay? God set him up as king. David relies on God in order to rule over Israel. Did he make mistakes? Yes. Did God forgive him? Absolutely. Did God remove David from the throne? No. So David is still God's man here. Okay? David sees Israel as belonging to God, not to himself. And also, in this case, those who are undermining and setting themselves against David aren't just opposing him then. Who are they opposing? They're opposing God and his will, because they want the power and the title for themselves to do with Israel as they please. Now, the next two verses in Psalm 7, verses 9 and 10, kind of wrap this thought up for us nicely. So verse 9, "Oh, let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end, but establish the just. For the righteous God tests the heart and minds. My defense is of God, who saves the upright in heart." There's a lot to ponder when I read through these verses about, he says, but he establishes the just. And for the righteous God tests the hearts and minds. Does that bring anything to mind from the New Testament when we read that line? Because when I read it, the first thing that comes to mind is the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, okay, I'm going to up the bar here. It's not based on your actions. Maybe you've never done that, but you're being judged by what's in your heart and in your mind. So when I read this, I kind of had to write down a little prayer to the Lord. Okay, I want, Lord, give me an upright heart. Let me be found among the just here, because I know that you judge by what's in the hearts and the mind, not just by our actions. So Lord, take me there, change me, transform me, make me like that, because I don't want to be found on the other side of this transaction.
Doesn't David write a psalm that says, "Create in me"?
Yes, he does. Yep. Create in me a clean heart, O Lord. Yep.
But the problem is, he can give us a clean heart, but we want to take back part of.
Can we keep it there, right? Yeah. Can we keep it clean? That's usually the issue. Okay. And in line with God's judgment and the destruction of the wicked, David writes this in verses 11 through 16. God is a just judge, and God is angry with the wicked every day. If he does not turn back, he will sharpen his sword. He bends his bow and makes it ready. He also prepared for himself instruments of death. He makes his arrows into fiery shafts. Behold, the wicked brings forth iniquity. Yes, he conceives trouble and brings forth falsehood. He made a pit and dug it out, and has fallen into the ditch which he made. His trouble shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down on his own crown. There's a lot of references that pop up in my mind when I read through this. But at this point, any questions or comments on what we just read? So we've come this far in the psalm. I'll tell you something that came to mind while you might be thinking of a question. So when I was reading through this, God is a just judge and is angry with the wicked every day. And he will sharpen his sword and bends his bows and makes it ready. When I read through that, it just brought to mind for me, the passage of Revelation when the angel's crying out, "Just are your judgments, O Lord." And the worst things are happening at that time, but yet he is God and his judgment is just for what's going on. That's just something that popped in my mind. Any questions or comments on where we are? Or anything that comes to your mind as well?
Well, he's recognizing his place,
Mm-hmm.
and he's recognizing God's power. In other words, my defense is is not in myself.
Right.
Can't defend myself. You know, all of these things, this person, this Benjamite, whoever, with all this that's going on. I mean, David as king could have probably had him killed.
Yep.
But again, everything we've seen about David so far with Saul, he could have killed him twice. He didn't. It's almost like he's still, he knows he's forgiven, because we see that, we've read that. He knows God's dealt with that whole thing. You know, there was a cost and a price to be paid, that firstborn. So he knows that that sin is not held against him any longer. But there's still something about David that keeps him in this place of not raising his hand, just like the other incident, when you mentioned those two possibilities. The other guy that was cursing him.
Yep.
Let him go.
Yep.
I'm not going to, let me just cut his head off. No.
That's right.
Who am I to say? God allowed him to curse me, let him curse me.
That's right.
And so, what you see about David here is though he knows he's forgiven, he knows that he's still appointed king, he knows that God is still allowing him to do all he's called him to do. He still has something about himself that says, you know what? Even though I've been forgiven, and even though I have power, I am submitting that power into God's hands.
Yes.
And I'm going to humbly come to him and say, God, as king, I could kill this guy, but I'm giving him to you.
Yep.
I'm surrendering the situation to you. I'm surrendering the outcome to you. I'm surrendering the judgment. But while he does that, he proclaims very loudly God's judgment.
Yes.
It's like this whole dynamic going on. I want to kill you, but I'm not going to kill you. God's going to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, and it's just like this whole thing is going on in his mind.
Yep.
Of surrender, humility, boldness, recognizing God's power, recognizing his position, and having to put all of it I would say in our day at the foot of the cross.
Right.
But in his case, he had to put it at the altar.
Yep.
Otherwise, he would go insane. I mean, and I know it's been said, maybe somebody whimpered it a while ago, bipolar.
Yeah. Because he's kind of all over the place.
He's all over the place
Yep.
emotionally. I mean, he's on the high, he's on the low. He's in the hands of God at the same time. He knows the enemy's having his way. So where does he find himself? He finds himself in this place of surrender. Every aspect of what he could do, he won't do. Every aspect of who God is, he's put it in his hand. And it's just, I don't know. It's hard to wrap around everything that David dealt with, because his was intense.
Yeah.
I mean, everything he went through was on a higher level than anything that we've experienced in our
Right, for sure.
even though a lot of us experienced a lot of bad things. It's just, I don't know. There's a dynamic here that I can't put my finger on.
Yeah.
But it's just him in the midst of all this, recognizing and crying out, surrendering, giving over, but still angry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he hasn't had a good example of what a good king should do.
Not yet, because there hasn't been one yet,
No.
right? All he's had is Saul.
Right.
And he started off good, but we know how he ended up, and that wasn't the
Yeah.
best model.
Yeah.
So the only king he has to model himself after is God himself,
So, yeah.
which at least David's very tight with God. So that helps.
And another thing too is like what the pastor was saying and everything else. He's not going to put his hand or take his life, but he's saying it out loud. It's kind of like passive aggressiveness.
Yeah, that's a way to see it, for sure. You got a question back there?
Yeah, I was going to piggyback what Grady was saying. That, there's a humility behind David here,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's also showing a meekness.
Mm-hmm.
He's not weak, but he's saying, I got the power, but I'm going to suppress it.
Yeah.
He was showing integrity.
Yeah.
But integrity, he's putting all these things in proper perspective now.
Yes.
He's putting it all in line.
Thank you. Yeah, and you made really good points there, because David, as king of Israel, if he wanted to take revenge, take this into his own hands, okay, it wouldn't take. David was a warrior. You got to remember where he came from and his background, okay. This is the guy that when he came through the streets, they'd say, oh, Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands, just to irk Saul a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, he's a mighty warrior, but also because of that, God said, nope, you're not going to get to build a temple.
Right.
Also, because you have blood on your hands.
That's a consequence.
Yeah.
But think about this too. I think you talked about this once before, or Danny, one of you guys have brought this up, is that with David, how hard it was for his men to serve with him sometimes because of the very things we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, God has delivered Saul into your hand.
Let's get him. Yeah.
Nope, I'm not going to do it. And then later, with Absalom, he's weeping and weeping and weeping over the son that was trying to kill him.
Yep.
And was it Jeroboam? I'm trying to make sure I got the right one that came, his leader, his main guy. What was his name?
I think you're right.
Joab.
It was Joab. Yeah, Joab was there.
Start with a J.
Yep.
Yeah, he says, look, you're disgracing your own men. Their morale is wiped out because you over here, who we saved from this man, your son, yes, but you need to get up, clean yourself up, and go out there
And go lead us. Yeah.
and so to be a servant or a armor bearer or anything in his army sometimes would have been very difficult.
Yeah.
Because of this dynamic of who he is.
Yeah.
And what he's put down, what he's raised up, how he's dealing with things. It would have been very hard.
Yeah. Because, you're a warrior in his armor, you're ready to fight, and then the king says, nope, we're going to let him go.
Right. And Saul and David both had a prophet. They didn't have Jesus.
Right.
They didn't have the Holy Spirit, but they had a prophet. And that prophet waited until they were either broken or they were, I've got this all done. Saul.
Yeah,
And then they come in.
that's right.
But he never leaves us without somebody to point out our sin.
Right, exactly. Like even with David, he kind of thought he had it all wrapped up nice and neat
Yeah.
and didn't really think much of it until Nathan came and put him in his place. All right.
An interesting point.
Yes, go ahead.
Because I was just thinking about not killing and so forth. He set that punishment ahead of him. In other words, what he did in 1 Kings 2, he says, or 7, he says, show kindness to the sons of Baziel and to Gilead, and let him be among those who eat at your table, because they supported me when I fled from your brother Absalom. Then in verse 8 it says, keep an eye on Shiggaion, the son of Gera, the benchman from Bahum, who is with you. He uttered malicious curses against me the day I went to.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
he hasn't forgotten,
No.
hadn't necessarily maybe not forgiven, but he didn't want to shed that blood on him because he made an oath to.
Yep.
Yes.
He surely wanted to have retribution, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
He wanted it, but he didn't take it.
It's human.
Yep.
He told someone to do it.
But so he passed it on to
someone.
the
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So in these verses that we just read, David lays out this powerful truth. That God is a righteous judge who sees everything. The wicked think they're going to get away with their lies, their attacks, and their undermining. But David says their own evil will eventually boomerang back on them. Their violence, their lies, and their schemes will all eventually fall back on their own heads. The very pit that they dig for others, they're going to fall into it. And I find this very interesting. I did a little search and I was like, I've heard this somewhere before. It's interesting that in Proverbs, David's son wrote something that aligns almost perfectly with verses 15 and 16 of this psalm. It's in Proverbs chapter 26, verse 27. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and who rolls a stone will have it roll back on him. Almost spot on. Lines up just right. So David didn't have to get revenge or take justice into his own hands, as we kind of discussed there. He didn't have to defend himself. Why? Because he knew that God was fighting for him. And this is why, even with all that was going on around him, David could still sleep at night. Because he put his trust completely in God. And so with that, the big question becomes, Well, do we trust God like that when people come against us or when circumstances arrive in our lives and come against us? Do we trust God that much? So in this psalm, we go through all this heavy stuff, and we go through all of that, and then David ends on a high note in verse 17 by praising God. So Psalm 7:17, here's how this psalm ends. After all this we've gone through, I will praise the Lord according to his righteousness, and will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. Amen. All right. So with that, with going through all this emotional roller coaster of, wow, Lord help me, and oh, I'm innocent, or judge me if I'm guilty, all over the place, appeals for God's justice, the description of God's wrath and judgment, and then this the wicked's own self-destruction, we end with this praise. So now do you see kind of what I described about the Shiggaion, how it kind of goes on this wild roller coaster ride. So here's some key takeaways here that we can take with us from Psalm 7. First, okay, take refuge in God first. Let him be the first one you go to when things get rough and tough and people are coming against you or circumstances are coming against you. He should be number one on your list. Okay? Second is examine your own heart. Where are you coming from? Kind of like David did. If I'm guilty, judge me for this. Where do I stand? Do I trust in him completely? Am I going to take this up on my own and go get my own revenge, or am I going to hand it over to God and let him do it? And this leads to number 3. Trust God with justice. Don't repay evil. Don't repay evil with evil. Don't do it. And then lastly, end in worship. And also you can begin with worship too. That helps, for sure. Okay, so that was Psalm 7. And real quick here, I'm going to go over just kind of like this model of the Shiggaion that was written out by somebody who studied it deeply. Okay, so cry of refuge, that was first, right? Passionate opening roar, oath of innocence and conditional self-curse if guilty, right? Bold integrity declaration, and then which shifts to self-examination. Appeal to God's judgment, arise, O Lord, right? Calls for righteous vindication and a testing of hearts. It's like an intense courtroom drama, right, with an emotional peak. And then description of God's wrath and the wicked self-destruction. Something important to know, right? And this just popped into my mind here. The wicked tend to self-destruct, don't they? And no matter what they're throwing out and all this hate and evil that they're spewing, it only destroys themselves, right? And it kind of comes to mind that, when they stand before God for judgment, does God send people to hell, or did they do it themselves?
It's free will.
Yep.
We have the free will to go to hell.
It's like, you didn't choose me,
Right.
you chose this instead. Yep. And I think that those people, sadly, they will know it's on them. It's not on God. Okay. So any final thoughts or comments,
And
questions?
I do have the NIV, and I don't always agree with their wording, but in verse 14, he who is pregnant with evil and conceives trouble. He is pregnant with evil. He doesn't show it right away.
Right.
It's like 9 months later, but he's stirring it up. Something is growing within him,
Yep.
and his heart is pregnant. There's a possibility, but to bring it to fruition, you've got to nurture it yourself.
Right. In order for it to continue to grow as well.
Sure, it doesn't miscarry.
Mm-mm. Now, yeah, but that's something. I mean, if you correct, repent, and give that to God, then you're no longer pregnant with that.
Right.
And no longer have that issue anymore. Okay. Anyone else? If not, then I'll go ahead and close.